Ahoy there, fellow travelers. Welcome to E-Travels with E-Trules, a personal and literary podcast of travel adventures and misadventures from around the world. This is Eric Trules, and thanks for listening. Welcome to another behind-the-scenes episode on the E-Travels with E-Trules podcast. I'm Eric Trules, and today I'll be talking with my friend and fellow storyteller, Debra Ehrhardt, who is a native of Jamaica. Growing up in hardscrabble Kingston, ever since the age of 7, Debra dreamed of coming to America, with its wonderful theme parks, candy stores, and tall buildings that pierced the sky. By the time she was 18, she had arrived here to the land of opportunity. But how she got here was the miracle that she wrote about in her triumphant one-woman play, Jamaica Farewell, which she has performed and toured all over the world for the last many years. But before I start chatting with Debra and revealing her Jamaican secrets, I'd like to thank my listeners again, who with the release of my last episode, number 13, The Gentrification of Mi Barrio Echo Park, are really driving up the stats. You know, stats, how many listeners a podcast has, and what the sponsors and advertisers call the bottom line. I think my team, composer Amanda Yamate and sound designer Alicia Bermudez, really outdid themselves on the episode. And even though I just rode my bicycle down the hill to the Cuban Music Festival at Echo Park Lake, like I said on the episode, sometimes you don't have to go very far at all to see the world. Other times, you have to make a great escape, which is exactly what Debra did to say her Jamaica farewell. Even though it's in the news quite a bit these days, many Americans and first world people all over the planet have no concept of the barriers that lie in the way of immigrants who try to leave their third world countries. As Debra says, many have a better chance of getting to the moon. Debra's father was an alcoholic and a gambler, making her childhood unpredictable and tumultuous, especially when her father had a bad night playing poker. Her religious and devoted mother blamed it on the devil. Her grandmother blamed it on her daughter, Debra's mom. And Debra just imagined herself away from it all, living a fairy tale somewhere in Disneyland next to Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. But she always believed that if you can dream it, you can achieve it. Unlike in Jamaica, where a person's class and economic status determines their destiny, it was America's intoxicating hope of a better future that lured Debra into a life-threatening escape over the uncrossable oceans with a smuggled suitcase of $1 million that landed her in Miami with a promise of a new life in the United States of America. Jamaica Farewell is the story of Debra's funny and miraculous journey from Kingston, Jamaica to the shores of America that captures perhaps the most adventurous and defining moments of her life. If we're lucky, she's promised to share a few excerpts from the show with us today. I also owe a shout-out and thanks to Debra for encouraging and helping my wife and I to voyage to Jamaica ourselves in 2009, where we traveled from funky Kingston up the entire East Coast, from Boston Bay to Ocho Rios, hanging out with reggae Rasta men and hooking up with 3 teenage boys in Montego Bay who took us to the beautiful white sand beaches of Negril on the northwest coast. It was a great and eye-opening trip. Thank you, Debra, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. Let's start talking about where you came from.
I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, many years ago, and like you said, my dad was an alcoholic and my mom spent most of her time in church. But I had, my childhood was pretty tumultuous, but I had a wonderful mother who tried to, make, she took me to church so often and tried to make, church, wash away all the problems, and when you're little and you're listening to the Bible stories, sometimes that it helps a little bit, but when the electricity gets turned off and there's no water and there's no light and your dad is just never around and everybody else's dad is around, it starts to wear on you a little bit. And I met a friend, who, her father seemed to be perfect. Their lives seemed to be perfect, but they got to go to America. And, when I asked my parents, can you take me to America? I realized then at a young age, it was funny. I remember the moment I realized that you're poor. You're not going anywhere, and this is how the world works. The rich people get to go and you don't get to go anywhere, and I thought, well, that's not fair. Why did I have to be born into a family that doesn't get to go anywhere? And why get the alcoholic dad? And, it's so weird. But I realized, I'm not going to accept that. And I think I've always kind of just been that way. I just don't let people tell me that's the rule and this is how it has to be. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't accept things that I feel like, I can change that. I can, no, you say no to me is just a way of finding out, okay, how I can get yes.
I know you a pretty long time now. We discovered each other through your piece, Jamaica Farewell, and you got me out of my little academic cloister to teach solo performance out in the universe. But in addition to our solo performance, storyteller, mixed paths, I especially invited you because your story resonates with my wife's. She comes from a third world country where she had nothing, and she always wanted to get out. She didn't know where to. It wasn't an American dream, but I now have 2 immigrants in my family around the corner here in Echo Park. My wife's been here 16 years. And I just adopted our nephew, who's been here 2 years. They both came without speaking any English.
Wow.
And I've learned so much more about my own country by waiting on immigration lines with her, meeting all her friends at the ESL schools from all over the planet. And as critical as I've always been of my own country, particularly the government, I got to see that our country still is the land of opportunity, and how grateful my wife and boy are to be here and how different their lives are. And it's been an eye-opening journey for me, and I'm so glad I've been on it.
When I heard about America when I was about 6 years old, it just seemed to be, the whole place sounded like Disneyland to me. And what I liked the most about America was that there was no class system. I heard in Jamaica, we have that class system where, you can just tell by how a person dresses and speaks what class they're from. You can just tell immediately. So it's education and money and the class system. And it's just very hard to break the barrier. People stay in their own class system. And it seemed to me like in America that there was no class system like the one they had in Jamaica. People didn't judge you from your family or how much money you could make. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons that I really wanted to go. I saw a maid that my grandmother had in Jamaica. Nobody would ever even talk to the maid. I remember one time I was playing, the maid had to bring her 6-year-old daughter to work one day because, I forgot, there was no school and there was nobody to watch her. And so I went to play with her, and my grandmother called me and said, "What do you think you're doing? Playing with the maid's daughter?" And I thought, but she's 6 and, she's my age and I want to play with her, so I learned a lot about that. And I heard that in America, people didn't care so much about things like that. Even if your father went to jail, they were willing to give you a chance. And when I found out that the maid went to Jamaica, first of all, an American from the Peace Corps married the maid, and we were in shock. Oh my God. Somebody married the maid? An American married the maid? And I thought, I'm going there, okay? Because, they didn't care. They saw you as you. And I never wanted people to look at me and go, which they did, you're the drunk man's daughter. You know what I mean? No, I'm not the drunk man's daughter. I'm Debbie Phillips, And I thought,
and you're also of a certain economic class that in India they call a caste. And it's true, particularly in less developed, less educated countries that sometimes we call third world countries, that the people just don't have the opportunity to ever transcend the class.
That is true,
they
Eric.
Get stuck.
Once a maid, always a maid. And her daughter will probably be the maid too. And that's just how it is. And so when this guy from America, from the Peace Corps, married the maid, and the maid was pretty, okay? But it was like, they don't care. You know what they would do in Jamaica is they would sleep with her, but they would never marry her or be seen with her in public, But it was wonderful to me for that this American just saw through that. And I thought, I'm going there. I love this place. It sounded amazing to me.
You have a little section in your piece, Jamaica Farewell, where suddenly the maid reappears, not physically, but I'll ask you to read that because it's fun and it adds a little more insight to what we're talking about.
Okay. My family was so far from financially secure that it went from nearly impossible to get a visa to clearly impossible. On the way home from school one day, I bump into Rufus, the mailman, and he hands me a postcard. It's from America! Dear Mrs. Phillips, even though I've been gone for years, it seems like it was yesterday that I was working for your mother cleaning her house. She always said I was the best maid she ever had. I hope everyone is well and happy. I've been teaching at the university. I'm an assistant professor of sociology. That's me in the postcard in my red Mercedes. I drive it fast, but I've never gotten a ticket. By the way, it's true what they say. America is beautiful. Love, Veronica. Mom! Look what America did to Veronica! Grandma's maid's a professor driving a Mercedes. This would never have happened if she'd stayed in Jamaica. Mom, I want to go to America so badly. What am I gonna do? There's nothing for me to do in Jamaica. Maybe you should go to cooking school. Cooking school? I like eating food. Cooking is just a necessary evil. Well, how about dressmaking school? I hate sewing, Mom. You know I have to rip out every third seam. I decide to work as a secretary for a man named Mr. Gordon who owned Cleopatra's Collections, a textile company in Kingston, until I figure out a way to get to America.
That's a lovely setup for your show, and hopefully we'll hear a couple more catch-ups as a little later on in the podcast. I have something in mind. I was just a visitor in Jamaica, and I always like to try to see local people and how they live. And with my big brain and my writer's personality, I always try to understand the culture. Now, what I saw there, and I want you to straighten me out or just comment on it, were tons of sexy young girls dressing to kill. I don't know what happened on the day they got married, but it seemed like soon thereafter they became these huge matriarchs of their family whose husbands were not all that dissimilar from how you're describing your dad, hanging out in the bars all day long, the mothers seemed entirely responsible, financially and otherwise, for bringing up the children. They were no longer foxy girls, but responsible women. They bonded together. There was like a matriarchy of society of strong women. And the men seemed like deadbeats, which is not that dissimilar from my wife's tribe in Indonesia. A matriarchal tribe where the women earn money and sort of in charge, and there's no direction or future for the young boys, and they end up in the bars spending time and drinking alcohol.
Well, that's a very good observation, Eric. It's kind of sad. I think that happens a lot in third world countries. But honestly, I see that happening in the African American community here in America. And it does happen in some places in America as well. But because Jamaica is such a tiny little island, it's right up there in your face. And it does seem to be happening a lot more. I feel, like the women, you're right. The women, Jamaican women are very strong. And it's something that I have been, I've written another play about this. The Jamaican women are so strong, but when it comes to the men, I don't know. It's a little bit of a male-dominated society, and they don't really stand up to the men. They do get married, and then all of a sudden, it's they're running the show by themselves. I saw it in my own family, but, the women are strong, but they just didn't stand up to the men because they feel like if they don't have a man, that, society looks down on you. So they just let the men get away with so much just to say that I have a husband and I have a man. I never kind of understood that, but it's mostly happening with the uneducated, set of women. Although you're right, a lot of women, even in the higher classes, they keep their mouth shut and look the other way because they don't want to be alone, or because they think it's just something terrible to be without a man. And I think it all has to do with self-esteem. That's what I think, the core of it is. And because our society, Eric, I hope I'm not going to say anything to offend anyone, but I feel like religion, Jamaica, I don't know if you know, we have more churches per square mile than any other country in the world. And I feel like I was brought up in the church, very religious. The people are so religious, and they believe that the man is the head of the house and you must respect the man no matter what. And, a woman must, honor her husband. And I think sometimes that they take that whole thing out of context, and just allow the men to do whatever they want. I think religion, plays a big part in just a mess of our world. That's what I think. But I think because Jamaica is so religious and the women just believe that, they just let them, it's sad. But I think it just stems from not having good self-esteem. And it's funny how history repeats itself, because if you see your mother do that and that's what you're taught, and you're taught to believe that you're nobody if you don't have a man by 30, and you'll do anything to keep a man who is just being rotten and mean to you. I don't know. I never got into that groove, because when I was very young, my father, who drank a lot, and, was at the bar most of the time, I always thought that I'd never marry somebody like him. And then
And you were gone by the time you were 18.
And I was gone by the time I was 18. Yeah. But, when I was a little girl, I admired my grandfather, Eric, because he didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He worked. He paid the bills. The lights were on. The electricity was on. And I always thought, I'm going to marry someone like my grandfather. I just adored him. And then I was spending the summer with them one year, and I climbed up into a mango tree to get a mango that I wanted. And, through the branches, I saw my grandfather in the neighbor's house. And I was like, oh my God, the man that I admired.
With the woman of the house.
With a woman, hugging her, his head in her breasts, and then I ended up falling out of the tree, but it made me realize, oh my God, this is crazy. But I was only 9 years old at the time, Eric, and my grandmother, who washed and cleaned and scrubbed for him and just laid at his feet and did anything that he wanted, he didn't want that. He wanted somebody who was independent and who had their own mind and who wasn't sleeping with him because she felt that's what he wanted, but somebody who thought, you know what, I want to sleep with you because you excite me. You know what I mean? And from that age, it taught me, I'm getting out of here because I hear that's how American women are. And that's who I wanted to be.
Well, you certainly fleshed out and sort of confirmed what I saw and proposed, but we can't let off too many societies for their misogyny and the way they treat their women, from the Muslim societies of the East and the Middle East, where women have no rights, to our country, where things have changed so much in my lifetime, to include much more equity and power to women. Mm-hmm. But, the 50s models was the Stepford wife and stay home and serve your husband. My wife now is listening and reading to a lot of audiobooks. One is called The Fall of Men. That's not the exact title. The Decline of Men, and in bold letters, and then much smaller underneath, and the Rise of Women. So it struck me. I read this with great discomfort, but recognizing the truth of how men's roles have been declining in the United States of America, because brawn and muscle are no longer needed in the factories and in the fields, and a lot of men are not accommodating very well to the change where jobs require more openness, more cooperation, more teamwork, where women are much more capable. And there's an awful lot of unemployed men in our society, not just in the African American community, but men are disempowered and confused and not completing college at nearly the same percentage that American women are. And women are now bringing home the bread, the breadwinners, at least as frequently as men. Mm-hmm. And sometimes these deadbeat American men are only a burden. And the book was quoting women saying, I don't need this husband. I don't want a husband. I'm divorcing this husband. He's just another mouth to feed. Mm-hmm. They already had enough children.
Yeah, that's true. Women are finally, my grandmother couldn't do that. She couldn't do that, and my mother couldn't do it. And you're right, Eric. Women now are realizing with an education, we can support ourselves. And I look back at my grandmother, and there's not a lot she could do because women at that time were expected to just take care of the house. Even in America in the 50s, like you said, we weren't encouraged to go out and get an education. It was even looked down at in some places. That's not your place. And I actually believe, this is a little off the subject, that Hillary Clinton didn't win the election against, I thought for sure she was going to beat Donald Trump for sure. I lost $1,000 on that because I didn't think that anybody in their right mind would elect him. But I realized again that I don't think, people are ready to see a woman in the White House because they think a woman's place is in the home, and
well, that's the famous glass ceiling that hasn't ultimately been broken. But there are a lot of women's shoulders and heads right up against that glass now. Mm-hmm. And they may not be CEOs of the corporations, but they have very responsible and powerful positions. And the men are scurrying around, more unemployed than ever and less
insecure,
empowered.
Yes. Very insecure. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's a crazy time right now. You're right about that because I see it happening even in my a group of friends. I see that happening. I think that I don't know if everything begins at home, and the mother and father are the ones who are in charge of kind of forming this child and making them feel a certain way. And I don't know if men from a young age are pushed into this way and girls are pushed into that way. And so they have the confusion there. But maybe it's the families now. I think we need to maybe bring the children up a little differently so that men don't feel that burden of, I don't think that a man should have the complete, in today's day, that a man should have the complete burden of paying for every single thing. Do you know what I mean? And I think women are better communicators. So if men learn to be better communicators, I would never judge a man on his manhood by what he can pay and what he can't pay, and women being a little bit smarter than men that way emotionally. I think depending on how you talk to the guy, if you can get that across. But I think many of them are beginning to feel a little insecure and not good about themselves. And then that just puts you on a downward spiral.
Yeah. Well, I just hit my retirement. I'm pushing 70. My wife's much younger than I. And it turns out that I no longer am working. She's working more to help our family income. I do my contribution from my retirement account and my Social Security. But she's working as hard as hell. She's motivated to work. She's doing all the work, and I'm staying home with the boy. My name is Mr. Mom. And whereas that used to be maybe embarrassing for a man, there's an awful lot of guys at the elementary school who are picking up their kids, and it's a beautiful thing that I'm getting to experience this late in life.
Listen, I think it's wonderful, Eric, because first of all, you were, I see that changing too, but the man has been doing that all along, bringing in the money, and sometimes you switch the roles around. And I think if you love each other enough, and if you're secure enough, that's what it is, that it's okay. You know what I mean? And I don't care. I have always been one not to care about what other people say. I care about what I feel and what my husband thinks. Do you know what I mean? And you were wonderful to her for so many years, and now it's her turn, and you can switch roles. And listen, I find that when a dad is involved in a child's life, it makes such a difference.
I wanted to change direction just a little bit and talk about my time being in Jamaica. Overall, it was wonderful. I went there as sort of an excuse to go to Cuba, because it seemed to be the most convenient and easiest way to get into Cuba without dealing with visas and restrictions, the things that are changing so much now in our country. But you helped me land in Kingston and found me a lovely host. But she was so protective of Surya's and my physical movement, saying that the city was so dangerous. And so I believe it was, but whether it was or wasn't, it constantly made me feel that I was in danger. She told me the house next door had been broken into, that I shouldn't walk to the corner and get a glass of coffee, of soda or something. But then we didn't want to stay there in that environment very much. So we left and we went all the way to the southeast corner. I forget what it's called there. Something like Macho Real or something. I forget the name of it. And then we went up the East Coast. And we met local people, and we stayed in the little bed and breakfasts, and we went across the street and hung out with Rasta men and women who lived off their land and cooked their own food. These people were so generous and friendly, and I didn't feel like I was just a tourist and they wanted my money. They were open, and everywhere we went for the next 2 or 3 weeks was geographically beautiful, lush, full of fruit and vegetables, and full of beautiful people who were generous to us and offered us places to stay and were fun to laugh with. Maybe it was the marijuana.
No. Honestly, Jamaicans, I've been all over the world, many, many countries. And I must say that Jamaicans are some of the warmest people in the world. You know, they love to share. We love to share our island. We love to share our wonderful food. It's just, when you get out of Kingston, the people are just not so much worried about money and dressing and cars. And, they are just themselves, and they just live for the day and to be happy and to share what they have. It's the Jamaican way. In the city, you do have to be careful and know where to go. I was there earlier on this year, and I had the most amazing time because I knew where to go. And I think the people that you were staying with, they were just a little worried. They're so worried about you. They don't want anything to happen to you under their care, that they were just a little much,
Kingston.
A little much. Yes. But like any big city, even there's places in Los Angeles that you have to be careful. Anywhere you go in the world, in Rome, in, London, there's places that you don't really want to go. And I guess they wanted to make sure that you didn't go anywhere that would be unsafe, because, you don't speak the dialect, and they didn't want you to be like a fish out of water situation. But overall, it's a wonderful. I live in America, and I love America and grateful to be here. But I go home like 2-3 times a year, Eric. I love it. I love the warmth, and I love the way that the people are just kind of can relax and no stress and kind of living in the moment, where sometimes in America, we get so caught up that we're constantly working here just to keep your head above the water. So many people in America, I know a lot of my friends, and sometimes me and my husband even feel like the water is catching up to our nose. And it's like you're always just paddling, always running, always moving. You got to pay this bill. You got to pay that bill. If you don't pay that on time, they turn that off, turn this off. Keep working. You pay that bill, work to pay the. Sometimes it does seem it can be a very stressful life. And even though a lot of people want to come to America, and it's an amazing place for opportunity, be prepared to work your ass off.
It's like everything is condensed. The evolution and the technology of the human race is all compacted here in these modern American cities. Mm-hmm. And you have to keep up with your email and your smartphone.
Yes.
And although that was supposed to be a convenience and save us time and give us comfort and ability to live more gracefully, it's done the opposite. It's made us more neurotic and more dependent. We can't get a letter and wait a week or two to respond to it. We have to answer 100 letters a day with our email. It's sort of ridiculous. And yet in poor third world oppressed countries, you get cultures like reggae and you have people creating spirituality out of oppression, and in your country, smoking a lot of dope, which somehow marijuana, which somehow enhances their spirituality, and with or without the marijuana, the music and the expression is beautiful.
Yes,
and the
music,
food.
the food, and people, it's just at a slower pace, it's just everything is a slower pace, and you can stop and really you take your time and smell the roses, as they would say. Here, then, people are just in such a rush now, we have to remind ourselves that you have to slow down. So when I do want to slow down, I go to Jamaica, and I try to get there as often as I can. I love it. It's a beautiful place, but like I said, I just wasn't one of those people. I just wanted more opportunity, and I didn't want them to tell me that, you couldn't do this. You couldn't go further than here. This is where you have to stay. I just that didn't work for me. I wasn't one of those people who just said, okay, yes, and was fine with it. So that's why I had to come to America.
In talking about your current show, whose name is
Cocktail, Shame on Me.
It's something else you brought with you here to America from your country. It's almost the inverse or another side of the joyous, buoyant Debra Ehrhardt that everybody knows. And could you talk a little bit about it and what your show's about? I don't think mentioning the date will be helpful because I'll probably release this a little afterwards. So, but we're still interested in your current story.
So these are still Jamaican stories, cocktails. It tells a story. It's my story. It begins with the first time I saw a penis, and it goes straight through to the sexual boom. You know, we're going up and down with, you know, some good things, some bad things, and right to the boom of, you know, the sexual big O. So it goes, you know, it takes me from a little girl. And I feel like in Jamaica, so many women don't enjoy sex because of shame, embarrassment that may have come from abuse. And unfortunately, there is a lot of sexual abuse and molestation going on in Jamaica. It's really sad, you know, because the people, they don't talk about it, because if you talk about it, and people point out at you now, you're ashamed, and then you're kind of like, nobody will want you. So you kind of keep it under the carpet, but it's still there in your head, and, you know, and you can't really enjoy your life. And, you know, my show is about letting go of shame and guilt, which just suppresses our most joyful impulses, you know. And I'm doing this because I want people to see that even though bad things happen to you sometimes in your life, you know, that you can still enjoy sex. I was molested in my church when I was 9 years old. And thankfully, my mother made me feel that I did nothing wrong. And I'm so grateful to her, because it was how she reacted to me that made me not have any hang-ups about it. And yet, you know, 9 out of 10, or actually it's almost 10 out of 10 women in Jamaica have been molested, and they don't talk about it because they're ashamed and embarrassed, and so they don't enjoy sex. But so I want them to see me on stage, you know, being molested, you know, by the preacher, and yet I'm able to have an amazing orgasm and still love men and still enjoy sex. So I feel like if we share our stories, and then people can go, well, okay, so maybe it's not so bad to just admit this and move on, you know, and because so many women, Eric, carry a bag of shame and guilt. You know, you're walking up this mountain of life, and the older you get, it's just harder to walk up that mountain. So I feel like, you know, you need to get rid of that baggage. And so I want them to know, look, you know, people look at me, Eric, and they go, Debra Ehrhardt, you know, you're so happy. You've got everything going for you. You know, you're so lucky. No, I'm not. I've been through everything. I want people to know I've been through everything that you've been through, but I'm just able, I'm going to throw it off my back. Cause first of all, I'm too lazy, and I'm not carrying any extra baggage on my back. And, you know, and I want to enjoy my life, you know, because I love men, and I'm not going to not enjoy my life because of one asshole man. Do you know what I mean? There are a lot of amazing men out there. I've met them, so I know there's some fabulous men out there, and nobody's going to mess up my sex life, okay? So
you know what I like about it? That's what I think is the purpose of art and the purpose of solo performance and storytelling. You want other people to hear your story, that you're brave enough and smart enough to see the value of, and to offer it up as something that is valuable and can help them. It's sort of
of course.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, when people hear, I can't tell you how many women have come up to me and said, oh my God, you're so brave. I can't believe you talked about that stuff. I can't believe you're having an orgasm on the stage. You know what? I feel like men get to talk about their coming of age stories. Why the hell can't I?
Well, obviously you can, Debra Ehrhardt, and you are. It is now time for the Trules Travel Quiz. Are you ready?
Yep.
Where were you born?
Kingston, Jamaica.
Where are you from?
Kingston, Jamaica.
Where do you call home?
You know what? I've got two homes, America and Jamaica, Eric.
What's your favorite place in the world?
My favorite place in the world is Strawberry Hill in Kingston, Jamaica. Did you go up there, Eric?
No. What's it like?
It's beautiful. It's up there in the mountains. It's not by the beach where most people would think. It's up in the mountains, green, lush, quiet, beautiful people, peaceful rivers coming through. It's like you're almost at the edge of heaven. And second is California.
I like that first one. Are you a traveler?
Oh, I think I'm away from home more than I'm home. It's only June, and since the beginning of the year, I've been in Jamaica, I've been in Florida, I've been in Atlanta, I've been in Ecuador, I've been in New Orleans, and I just got back from Atlanta.
You travel the world telling your stories.
I do. I think it's so important. People have been telling stories from the beginning of time, Eric, and that's how I think we realize that no matter where you're from in the world, I feel like if we share our stories, whether you're from America, Timbuktu, wherever, we realize that we're really not so different after all.
That's 100% what I believe, and partially why I'm doing the podcast, why I've spent my life in storytelling, because I think we have a lot more in common than all the fear-mongering that tells us how different and afraid of the other we should be.
Yes.
What do you think it means to be a traveler?
Oh, you know what? What it means to be a traveler. Listen, I feel like people who get out of the town that they were born in and travel to other places just it gives you a different kind of education than college and books can give you. I feel like you get to actually meet the real people from those areas and to interact with them. You get to try different food, different tastes, different smells, different places to where you're from. It's a different kind of education. I think people who travel are more interesting than people who never leave their tiny little city.
I like that. What's one place you've always wanted to go where you've never been? Why?
I would love to go on a safari to Africa. I would love to go to the motherland, Africa. It just sounds like an amazing place, but I am afraid because I haven't been there yet because the violence. I hear that there's a lot of violence against women. The people seem to be constantly fighting against each other. And then I don't want to get eaten by a lion. So I haven't been there yet, you know.
Liz Femi was a guest just recently here, and she's from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm. I love Liz.
Yeah. What's your favorite city? Why?
I just went to New Orleans, and I'm telling you, I can't believe I waited this long to go there. It was amazing. And I just learned so much history about how the French were there, and then Napoleon sold it to America. But I loved it because it was so many different kinds of people were there, and it was just so exciting, all the different kinds of food, the different types of people getting along. And it was just so much more interesting. The stories, the homes, the different parts of town, the different cultures intermingling, the Creole people, the mixtures of people that everybody looked a little bit, it kind of reminded me a little bit of certain parts of Kingston.
I was thinking, it's like a feel good, let the good times roll,
yes,
party city, and,
yes, and
some of Jamaica's right there.
Listen, I got to tell you that it was one of the first places, and I love New York City, I love Los Angeles, but it's kind of fast paced out here, and moving, just keep moving, keep going. But New Orleans, when I got there, Eric, it reminded me a little bit of Jamaica. The people were a little slower, and they were very kind, and they would stand on the road and talk to you. And I'm like, my goodness, this person's talking to me. It's been half an hour and they're still talking. We're here in America, in California, New York, and some of the biggest cities. You go, they go, how are you? They don't even listen to hear the answer. They go, how are you? Just because, it's automatic.
Yes.
But so I loved New Orleans.
What's your favorite park or non-urban place? You might have told me already, but let's see.
My favorite park
or non-urban place.
I think I would have to say, there's certain parts. I went up to Yosemite, and I did love that area up there in Northern California. I did love that. So I would have to say it would have to be up there near Yosemite.
What's the green part of Jamaica between Kingston and Ocho Rios in the north? It's the green or
Blue Mountains.
The Blue Mountains.
Yeah, the Blue Mountains are just
beautiful.
Oh, it's stunning up there.
Yeah. What's your favorite mode of transportation?
I love to walk. And if I'm in a city, if somebody said to me, Deborah, where would you want to live? I really don't want to live far away from the city. I've told my husband I'd love to live on top of a store in a city because I'd love to come down and just walk and talk to everybody. I love that. I love people. They fascinate me, and I don't want to be far from people. I love hearing their stories. So I love to walk. And if I don't walk, then it would have to be a bicycle. And then, of course, because we live in California, we have to drive because everything is so spread out.
Who do you like to travel with?
I love to travel with, my husband loves traveling, and my daughter is a traveler. And she was the one that took me to New Orleans. She actually went there first. And she said, Mom, for your birthday, I'm taking you to New Orleans. And I couldn't go at my exact birthday time. So we went, a month and a half ago when I could go and I wasn't working. And I had the time of my life. She loved to travel. She's somewhere every month and she's going, Mom, you got to go here. I went here. It's amazing.
Two forks diverged in the road. Which way would you go?
I would have to flip a coin. I'd flip a coin. I mean, is there anything on either side that would drag me in? I'd flip a coin. I would take the road that would be more exciting and adventurous. That's the one I would take.
That's the one. Yeah. Last question. Where will you go when you die?
Eric, I used to think that there was a land above the sky paved with gold and angels. When I die, I'm going to be cremated, and I want my ashes to be thrown over the ocean. I don't want to be in the ground. And as a matter of fact, I even wonder sometimes if when I die, I don't even care about that. I just want to live now. And believe me, I am living the heck out of my life. I'm almost 50 years old, and I'm so excited about just being alive and well and being able to feel every single thing and taste every little thing. And I just feel like I'm running this race, and I'm more than halfway through the race. And I just want to make sure that the next few laps that are left, that I'm going to just live the hell out of every single moment, because that's all I care about. Dying, when I take my last breath, it's over and they can do whatever they want. I'd like to be, like I said, cremated and sprinkled over the Caribbean, but I don't care about dying. I just want to care about living right now.
Good for you. I usually wrap it up here, but we'd like to hear what happened at the end of your story, though. So if you'd finish us up with one more excerpt from Jamaica Farewell.
So, I got to this country. I was so stupid and young. I was almost 18 years old, and I decided to smuggle $1 million out of Jamaica to get to America. I know I'm old because I can't even think of doing anything like that again, Eric. So here I am. I get through the Jamaican side. I'm on the plane. I land in America, and I've got $1 million in cash, heading through to American customs with the American guy next to me. True to form, Jack is waiting for me. On the way to customs, I hear panting. At first, I think it's me, but I realize that we're surrounded by guards with the meanest looking dogs I ever saw, and they're sniffing people's luggage. Oh, Jesus, this is it for me. They're gonna smell the money. Jack doesn't offer to take my bag this time, and we are getting nearer and nearer to customs. This is the end of the road for me. Suddenly, my mom's Bible phrases come to mind. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I pick up the bag and put it down. Then again, how many times would I have to put this thing down? Where's the gentleman I came with? What happened to the chivalry routine? I have to think fast. Thinking slow could mean 20 years in the big house. I stop, turn to Jack, look deeply in his eyes and step closer to him. Jack, I'll never forget today. I lean in toward him, press my mouth onto his and give him the biggest kiss he ever got, tongue and all. Without hesitation, he picks up my bag and hand in hand we walk towards a customs officer. Chivalry on this day, it turns out, was not dead. They recognize him and motion us to come through. Hey, Jack, buddy, come on through. They stamp our passports and send us through. I can't believe it. They check nothing. I look back to see them asking all the Jamaicans open up their bags and asking them a million questions. Oh my God, I did it. I did it. I'm in America and I'm free. You know, Eric, when you're 18 years old, you think you're invincible. I could never do anything like that. Now I can barely go through the red light. I'm sure you're wondering what happened to Jack, the CIA guy. I did end up dating him for a while until the CIA actually sent him off on an assignment in Africa, but we still keep in touch. He sends me a picture of him and his gun in each new country he's stationed in, and every year the gun gets a little bigger. A year and a half later, when things calmed down in Jamaica and my parents were able to join me here, Daddy couldn't stop drinking, though. He died from cirrhosis of the liver, but he did live to meet his American grandchildren and eat hot dogs with them. A couple years after that, Mom married a man who winked at her in church. He pointed to the Bible she was holding and asked if it was a good book, and she replied, "No, sir, it's the good book." They're married, and she's been happily correcting him ever since.
The end. Curtain down. Standing ovation. Okay. Thanks for being on the show, Debra. You're always a bundle of positive energy. I hope our listeners have enjoyed our conversation about your growing up in Kingston, about your great escape, and your Jamaica farewell. Listeners, if you'd like to learn anything more about Debra or to stay in touch, please go to her website, JamaicaFarewellThePlay.com. I'd also like to thank you, my audience, for listening today. To let you know where you can catch up on any of the episodes of the podcast that you've missed and where you can leave your comments after each episode, go to this address on the web, erictrules.com/podcast. Any ideas you may have in terms of donations, advertising, or sponsorship, please let me know. Think Season 2. If you're listening on iTunes, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Any questions for me about anything, leave me a message at erictrules.com. Finally, please tell all your friends and join the Facebook groups. The podcast grows one listener at a time. Until next time, as they say in Jamaica, man, one love. And as we say on the podcast, happy trails. Original music composed by Amanda Yamate. Sound engineered by Scott Barber at the Barbershop Recording Studio in Echo Park, California. produced by Harry Duran at Fullcast. This podcast has been supported with a USC Capstone Grant. Special thanks to Phil Allen and USC's School of Dramatic Arts for their support.